Welcome. And we're now in Daf Lamed Aleph in Beitsa. The serious question of how do we chop our wood on Yom Tov. Right, so here at the bottom of the page is a Mishnah that tells us how to chop the wood. At the top of the page was a different Mishnah, very similar preamble to chopping the wood is collecting the wood. Where can you collect the wood from? Certain places it might be considered muksa because, of course, wood starts out as part of a tree. And even if it's in pieces, but it's pieces of a tree, so you can't necessarily assume it's not muksa. So the previous Mishnah talks about when can we assume it's not muksa, when can we assume it's a fair game, as it were, and then this Mishnah is talking about which type of wood you're allowed to chop up, what wood is off limits, and then at the end of the Mishnah, what type of implements are permissible to use and what type are not.
So the Mishnah discusses what type of wood you gotta chop off and not.
That's the first subject. Basically, it just tells us one type of wood is off limits. And then the next part of the Mishnah is talking about which implement you can use to do the chopping. Basically, obviously, some type of an axe-like implement. What are you looking for?
Cup. Plastic cup.
Alright, so shall we read through the Mishnah again?
Yes.
And I don't remember if we finished the Roshes or not.
We did. We got up to the Gemora, Rosh.
Okay, so as soon as we finish reading the Mishnah with the explanation, hopefully we can start the Gemora if everyone's of a like mind. Okay, so who would like to read the Mishnah? Of course, Jack gets preference if he feels like reading.
Okay, Masnisi, Ain.
You know what that stands for, right?
You learned, right?
Our Mishnah. Masnisina means our Mishnah. Our little chunk of DNA knowledge. Jewish DNA, the Mishnah.
Masnisi, Ain.
Mevakin.
Mevakin, Eitzin, Lo Min HaKorot, Lo Min HaKorah. Nishbara Yom Tov.
Exactly. Okay. So what are we
We
saying?
don't take it from
Mevakin. Mevakin.
taking it from
A beka is like a crack. In fact, you know, there's a halacha called Bakia Sapas. Anyone know about that? It's a section in Shulchan Aruch. You can look it up in your Mishnah Brewer or whatever. You know what that's discussing? Breaking bread, exactly. So how to cut it, which end to cut, where in the bread to cut, how to cut it, all that kind of, all those halachas are called Bakia Sapas. Okay, so
From the side. I heard something
it's different
very,
halachas.
I heard something very interesting about that actually.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's the time to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But you make the bracha from the hard crust rather than from the centerpiece, the tasty part.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same thing. You make the bracha from the klippos, which represents the crust around the bread.
Mm-hmm.
Which is us, basically, the seichel behemoth. That's where the bracha comes from. Not from the elokis, which is the tasty, the morsel. You make a bracha, you make it from the heart, you make it from here. You don't make it from, you make it from here. So they talk about this side, that side, both sides. Very interesting.
the crusty hard part.
The crust is the kippers, the hard crust. Well, that's part of the bread. It's
Always know there's something wrong with those crusts.
Yeah. Crust of the earth. Okay, now, so Ein Mevakin means we're not allowed to chop. Right? Go ahead, try to.
Eitzin, Lo Min HaKorot, ולא מן הקורה שנשברה ויוקר.
Exactly.
So you can't take it, I mean, the korot is what
A korah is the singular and korot is the plural. It's the same word root.
Slice.
No, these are beams of wood which have been properly planed and
Straightened up.
and manufactured, as it were, so they can be used for the building.
Okay.
This is related to the word that we don't really use so much today, but in Chazal it's very much used as the roof of a building. It's called the tikra, the same root. You know where you find this in Chumash, by the way? Lot, of all people, right? When he takes in the angels that look like Arabs or whatever, and the rest of the people in Sodom are not happy with what he's doing, he says, you have to come in, you have to, for that reason you've come into Tseil Korasi, into the shade of my roof, so to speak. So that's the word koira is right in there in Chumash. If you want, we can look it up. Anyone want to look it up? No. I know you take my word for it. The question is, will it end up on your hard disk or your soft disk? You know, nobody uses floppy disks anymore, so if it ends up on your floppy disk, you're in trouble. It has to end up on your hard disk.
Some people have a few floppies in the back pocket.
Oh yeah? I'm not sure if they have them anymore, but okay. Jack says
That's
they do.
true. That's true. I don't think they got
I
it.
think it's gone out of style. Like someone told me today, there's no more MP3s. Everyone just uses their smartphone. Anyhow, so if it's going to end up in your hard disk, we don't have to look it up. You know what the expression in Chazal is? Osios machkimos. The letters make you wise, right? When you see it, it like makes an impression on your brain, right? If you just hear it, it's kind of like floating around. So if this word koira remains with you, good. If not, it's good to remember it's in the story of Lot.
You see it, right? You see it.
If you see a word, it makes its impression upon you. Much more so than just what you hear. Of course, there's a lot of things that we hear that we do remember that if they're said, that's why the Mishnahs are written in such a special way that we can remember it if we try hard. But in any event, seeing something is much more powerful on the brain. Okay, so let's just say in your own words, what's the first message of the Mishnah then?
Okay, so you don't take
No. Chop.
trees, lo mina korot, not from the...
So you know, eitzim can be a tree, as you said, but also just being wood.
okay.
Right?
Mina korot from the wood.
So eitzim are wood. A kor is a special type,
It's a piece of processed
properly processed lumber, right? Like lumber. Lumber like in a lumber yard,
Yeah.
right? You ever go to a lumber yard? It's all stacked up beautifully,
Cut.
and if you start to mess things up, the guy's going to get very upset, right?
That's it. Get your cotton picking hands off the wood.
Especially if you're smoking a cigarette, it'll really hit the roof. So they're very careful. Why are they so careful in a lumber yard? Because by that point, the wood is very expensive.
Yeah. If you make stains on it, you can't sell it.
Make stains on it, do anything, just knock it over, it might get dented, it might get whatever. They're very upset, right? So therefore, it's something that people are very, very careful not to damage. Anything that we're careful not to damage or lose, obviously, even more so, that's called muksa machmus chisaron kis. It's a type of muksa, actually, because since people don't want to use it for normal things, basically, just like regular muksa, a person says, I don't want to use it because it's not a Shabbos tikkun thing or whatever. So here also, a person thinks, I don't want to use it because it could get ruined. Anything like that people generally speaking would not want to use because they could get ruined, is a certain type of muksa called muksa machmus. Muksa that's only due to chisaron kis, the loss of money. Kis is like the pocket, or the pocketbook, or a purse even is called a kis in Chazal. So it says there's three ways you can find out how a person ticks, right? Three ways.
Kiso, Koso, and
Kasa,
Kaso.
right? All of them
Very
have to
true.
do with what's buried inside, right?
Very true.
So, a kos is a cup, kis is a pocket. Very similar type of cavity that holds things inside of it. So, moksa machus and kis means that people don't want you to use it because it's expensive. And I don't want to just waste it on mundane things, or even worse, if it just gets ruined for nothing. So what would you like to cut it up for? What are we saying? I'd like to chop it up and use it for what? What would he like to do with this wood? He'd like to chop it, just talks about chopping, but what do you think the guy wants to use it for?
And build something with it.
No, this guy who we're telling him don't chop it up on Yom Tov. What do you think he would want to chop it up on Yom Tov for? Firewood, something like mundane, right? That's not, but by now it's very expensive wood. Right? Imagine an antique chair. You can just throw that into the fire because you need firewood? No. Right? It's very expensive, very dear to you, and you don't want to just waste it, as it were. Same thing over here. This lumber, this koira, is a very precious item. So that's why the Mishnah says you can't use it for your normal firewood. You can't just come along and chop it up because it's a certain type of muksa. So that's what we're saying. Rashi doesn't really say it. Rashi says the Gemora is going to explain it. I hope Rashi and the Gemora to say what we're saying. But in the meantime, that's what we're learning. So therefore, you can't use a regular korah or even a korah shenishbara, even if it breaks. Right? There's different ways that boards can break on their own, as it were. And sometimes it's even expected that it might break, right? We have that case of the sukkah that was about to fall, and we have different things before we spoke about where you were expecting it to become available, as it were, and then you still have a question if you can use it, right? So here also, even though if you were actually expecting it to break, there's a Gemora before that says that you still can't use it. That's maybe the chiddush of the second thing, because we already said you can't use a korah. The answer is you can't use a korah even if you're expecting it to break, and now it becomes available as firewood because it's broken anyways. Doesn't matter. It started out Yom Tov as muksa, it stays muksa. Now the second half of the Mishnah, the ain. You get a chance to practice the word again. Mm-hmm.
Lo, Kardom,
Right.
the Lo,
Be Megillah.
Megura, Megura, the Lo, the Magal, Ella, the Toki,
Ko
Kofitz.
Beats. Okay, so what do you think it's saying over here? Just in a general way, before we get into the details. Just in a general way right now. What do you think it's generally saying? Without getting too detailed. Do you have a general picture of what it's saying? Talking about chopping again, right? That's a start. Ein Movavi means we also can't chop what? This time we're not talking about the wood, but rather the implement. What are you allowed to use to do the chopping?
Okay.
That's what the second half of the Mishnah is talking about. So don't use a cardo.
Cordom sounds like
That's an actual axe in their day, not maybe the axe that was. We know it might have been a bigger implement than we were used to seeing. Okay, not a professional axe, let's call it. Okay, and not with a megera as a saw, and not with a magal as a sickle. Kofitz is more like a chopping, like a machete. Yeah, like a butcher's knife, like you chop something. Okay? And even though Rashi goes into detail about what some of these things look like and what they might be used for in their day. But the general reason why there's certain implements you can use and certain implements we see here that are off limits that you can't use to chop the wood is what? What did we see yesterday in Rashi? The general rule was what? Anyone?
So these instruments appear as clay unus, that they
Kleonus.
Kliumnus,
and that they
which translates as...
daily work, your ordinary work.
No, that was what we thought it might be saying, but Rashi actually brought it into a more detailed problem, more than just that. But the main thing is, in English, we translate Kliumnus as what?
It's worksman's tools.
Craftsman, right?
Oh,
A craftsman. An umnus is a craft, is a person who has a craft. Yes, that's a craftsman, okay? Umanut is craftsmanship, okay? So, now basically, craftsmen have very sophisticated instruments that they use. And some of these things replicate that or look very similar to the actual tools that are used by the professional craftsmen. So Rashi said the problem is we don't want you to use an implement that looks like a professional tool that the craftsmen use. Why? Rashi said more of a problem than just looking like coal.
It's seen as
what?
As ordinary work.
No. Remember, Rashi said something more. Rashi said something more. Fourth line from the bottom. V'nire ke'ose bo malacha.
It looks like you're doing work with it.
Looks like you're doing work with it. Looks like you're out back doing real workmanship. Not just because it resembles something that we use during the weekday. That's sort of making, Yom Tov mundane. That is a problem which we saw earlier in the parak. But here it's a worse problem. It's more like it looks like you're doing mamish malacha. It looks like you're, crafting different things in the backyard, in the back of your house. I see you using this for chopping wood, but I'm thinking he's holding an implement that normally craftsmen use. He must be back using it in the back somewhere to do proper malacha on Yom Tov, which is much worse than just having something that looks mundane. Basically, it looks like he's doing malacha that's asur on Yom Tov. So that's even worse than just like looking mundane, right? So Rashi makes it sound even worse than the problem we've had in the past. So that's what Rashi says. With the first three implements, they look too professional. Therefore, they imply that you're doing something wrong with them. The last one, the butcher's machete or whatever, the butcher's chopping knife, that's not considered something that's done professional. That's not a professional implement. Especially according to the way Rashi learns, it's just for chopping meat. That's not a malacha. It doesn't look like you're doing that with that anything that does resemble malacha. So therefore, it's mutter.
No precision necessary.
No
precision necessary for that.
No precision. It's also, there's no malacha involved. Just chopping up meat is not a malacha. So even if I say, look, it looks very much like a butcher's knife. Yeah, okay, so what? It's good. It's fine. That's what I would say. Okay. You want to start the Gemora?
Me?
Well, you're one of the people.
Yeah.
If you want, you be a person who wants to start the Gemora. Anyone else want to go over something more in the Mishnah before we start the Gemora?
No.
Okay. So who would like to start the Gemora?
Agreed.
Go ahead.
Amrat. Resha. I'm Mevakin Klau. If you sit in the Resha, you can't chop at all.
So what's the Hey? The
What
Ha. The Hey of the Ha Amrat.
you said.
It's either but or behold or maybe even worse. Didn't you say
Didn't you say?
the hey can often make it into a question, right? So perhaps it's even like a rhetorical question. But didn't you say already in the ratio you can't chop?
That's it, can't.
Altogether.
So what's Rashi bothered? The Gemora bothered by?
Obviously, you can't chop from these items only from the cliffs.
So the first Gemora's saying now. In the beginning, we said what?
No chop.
Can't chop at all.
Yeah,
Now, truth is, it didn't really say that, right? What did the Mishnah say? Can't chop koros. So that would be a simple explanation, but it seems that the Gemara is taking that to be like a general rule. You can't chop koros, but then we're turning around and telling you, but if you're going to do it, use a kofitz. So that sounds like a contradiction.
Yeah.
Especially if the beams are valuable. Why would chopping with a butcher's knife make it less valuable? It's still valuable wood.
That's the point.
That's from case.
We've said already you can't do it, right?
Yeah.
So why does the end of the Mishnah say, but if you're going to do it, use a kofitz?
Right.
That sounds like a contradiction. You just told me we can't do it.
Yeah.
So you agree it's a contradiction?
Yes.
Okay. Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's see if there's any Rashi on this. V'ha'amra reisha ein mevakim klal.
So read Rashi as well.
I don't think that would be appropriate. It would be nice if we could share the Rashis. Anyone else want to try the Rashi?
Okay.
Shabbatai?
Okay. So Bara.
Now, you see the little asterisk there, and in my vision at least has an asterisk, and then you know that you're supposed to look to the side. You know what it says on the side there in the brackets? Sadiq Lamed means what? Sarich Lomar. You really must say, it's a way of fixing the girsa, right? Fixing the text. Savruha, which is different than savra, right? Savruha means people thought. People thought, and usually it means like people thought something and it was wrong. What we call a havamina.
So Romans they thought.
Literally. Literally, they thought it. Savruha. It's what we normally call a havamina, like a hypothesis that was wrong. That's how the Gemora starts out, usually trying to project a certain way of thinking as being a simpler way of thinking. That's always what we assume. We always assume there's a simple approach, and then when we have to, we try to concoct a more complicated approach, right? But we try to start with a simple approach. So that's always what we call the havamina, the very beginning of the thought process where we assume the simplest explanation. Okay, so let's try it. Savruha, they thought it, meaning they thought the shot over here was what?
The tema, there is masnisim. It's the reason of our Mishnah.
Correct.
Love, mishum muktzah. That is because it's
Love.
That is not a matter of muktzah.
Mm-hmm.
Tana Bereisha, taught in the first part of the Mishnah, Ein mevakim etzim, ein mishum.
No, wait. So up to the Ella, what is Rashi saying? We thought, and usually that means mistakenly. We mistakenly thought when we first read the Mishnah that what? That when it said that we're not allowed to be mevakim eitzim, right? The very first words of our Mishnah is ein mevakim eitzim. So we thought that had nothing to do with muksa, ein lav mishum muksa. It wasn't because of the problems of muksa tana bereisha ein mevakim eitzim. That wasn't the reason why we learned in the beginning that ein mevakim eitzim. What did we think the reason was then?
Rather, mishum malacha v'tzar v'tzrecha.
Oh wait, malacha. right?
Yeah.
Because of the problem of some kind of malacha.
Work.
Now, that might mean work, just like heavy work, that you're not supposed to do heavy work, because the next word in Rashi implies that.
Yeah.
He says, ve
Tracha.
tircha,
Tircha. Difficult word.
difficulty, right? Which means you're working too hard. Now, that could mean that the malacha is also just working, malacha v'tircha, it's like one idea. We thought the problem was you're not allowed to chop wood on Yom Tov because of malacha v'tircha. But if you want to learn Rashi in the normal way of learning Rashi, that each word in Rashi means something separate, that it means we thought there was a problem of work, yes. We also thought there might be a problem of malacha, which is an interesting point, right? That we're saying don't chop wood on Yom Tov because you might end up doing a malacha. And of course, because of the tircha, because it's too much work. We want you to have a nice time on Yom Tov. Therefore, all throughout the Masechta, we've had plenty of things where they said it's too much work, sorry, you're not allowed to do it. But let's take the first word in Rashi, malacha. What malacha might there be, by the way?
Building.
Well, chopping wood.
Slicer,
For building purposes.
Sorry, no, not necessarily. That's Moras Ayin. No. Rashi's not saying there's a Moras Ayin here. He doesn't say it looks like you're doing something. He said we thought that they forbid you to chop wood because of malacha v'tircha. Why would that occur to you? Why would you think that it's also to chop wood because of malacha v'tircha? So tircha, I understand. Too much work. Too hard. Relax. Have a good time. Because all wanted to sort of legislate a day off. But malacha implies that you actually might come to do a malacha when you chop wood. What malacha might you be doing when you're chopping wood? Anyone?
Slicer?
No, soiser is when there's a building. I just have a piece of wood in front of me. What soiser is there?
Carving.
Carving? What malacha is carving? One of the 39? Not that I know of, I'm not sure. You mean that's like writing? Proper writing?
Putting a form or something.
No, just chopping, karate chop.
Hockey.
What's the problem? Hockey?
Hockey.
This guy's a Canadian. Hockey.
I can't give it up.
With your maple syrup.
Yeah.
Oh, grinding.
Oh, interesting. Right. That might have been a Havamina, right? Because what is grinding doesn't always mean in a grinder. For example,
Making smaller pieces.
when is there a problem on Shabbos? That's almost every meal you have to worry about this.
So if you use a fork or something for...
No, when you prepare a salad.
Separation.
When you prepare a salad. What do you normally do when you prepare a salad? You take the tomato and you cut it up into smaller pieces so that you can enjoy your salad. Right? You don't just throw a whole tomato into your salad, a whole lettuce, a whole head of lettuce, and just let everyone take what they want. Right? You cut it up, you prepare it. Right? So what's the halacha? Anyone know the halacha? Are you allowed to cut up tomatoes and carrots and
Sure. Yeah.
and celery and whatever for the salad? You're allowed on Shabbos?
Not too small pieces.
Depends.
They're
It depends.
killer.
It is derech achila to a point. Again, it could be a problem of toichein, could be grinding, meaning you're taking something that grows and you're cutting it up into small little tiny pieces. You're basically pulverizing it. Okay? It happens to be that there's a difference between the American salad, or maybe, I don't know about South African, and Canadian, right? Probably like an American, and Israeli salad. Anyone ever watch Israelis prepare a salad?
Yeah, they're really chocolates. Yeah.
It ends up being very, very finely. And that is a real problem on Shabbos. That's a real problem on Shabbos. There's the one place where being a bit of a lazy American comes in handy. So you don't have to worry about cutting it up too small that it's going to be toching. But you can look it up in your halachic books, wherever you go to learn your Shabbos halachas. Look it up, how to prepare a salad. It's not so simple.
He's talking with a tat or a tit?
Tes, Vav, Ches, Nun. So they do talk about it. They do talk about the problem of tochein in regards to chopping up wood. Because even though wood isn't a food, but who says it has to be a food for tochein? Like, for example, bishul. Right? Bishul is usually on food. But it also applies to metals. If you heat up metals, it's applying heat to perfect something. So sometimes the Mishnah Berurah even talks about heating up things that are non-edible. Could also be a problem of Bishul. Okay, so not every time does it apply to food items, etc., etc. So here also, maybe that's what the Havamina was. We're not letting you chop up wood because if you chop it up too finely, to small little pieces, it could end up being, or let's say sawdust. What if I take a saw and I go like this? All that dust. Where did all that dust come from? It didn't just fall from the sky like mun. It came out of that wood. Wood that was a solid piece is now in tiny little fragments. That's token. That's clearly token, right? That is a real serious problem. So Rashi says maybe all of them have that element of them, and maybe that's what we would have thought the whole Mishnah is speaking about. Okay, so that's what the Gemora is saying. You told me not to do tochen. Then you turn around and tell me I can do it with a kofit. So then that's the problem, right? So what Rashi says, what would be the problem? Not muksa. It would be a problem with some kind of malacha or tircha. Either one would be a problem, just chopping by itself, even without a problem with muksa. And therefore, if you read it that way, if you read the Mishnah that way, keep going.
So this is what it should have said.
No, this is what it did say if you look at it that way. If you look at it the way we're thinking maybe to learn, savruha.
Don't chop wood.
Right.
Lo minhag korot from a beam. Anish baroim me'erev yotov. And you can't even...
Not even from words that broke Erev Yom Tov. So if it broke Erev Yom Tov, then is it muksa? Not muksa. That's what Rashi's saying. You could have learned on Mishnah the whole prohibition has nothing to do with muksa. Meaning even a board that broke before Shabbos, we're telling you not to chop up. And once it breaks on Erev Yom Tov, what's its usage? Va'omdin lahesek.
And it's
standing to be burnt up as fuel for a fire. So it's not muksa, it's definitely firewood already. And not even from a koira, etc., that broke up on Yom Tov. Okay? And Rashi says there's two chidushim here. Don't chop up a board that broke Erev Yom Tov, and you can't do it on a board that broke on Yom Tov. For two different reasons. What are the two different reasons? So Rashi said, if it's going in that order, if that would be true, the way we had thought to learn the Mishnah, that it's telling you not to chop wood that was even broken Erev Yom Tov, and don't chop wood also that's broken on Yom Tov, that would be going in ascending order. Zu, the Ein Sarich Lomar Zu, Katani. Right, there's two ways for the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi to set up subjects in the Mishnah. Usually goes in ascending order, right? Lo Zu, Af Zu. Not only this, but even that. Right? It's like you're going for the bigger Kiddush as you go along, more and more higher level Kiddush. Rashi is saying here it would be the opposite. If it's really true what we're saying now, that the way to read the Mishnah is don't chop it up on, even if it broke Erev Shabbos and has nothing to do, Erev Yom Tov, and has nothing to do with Muksa, just a problem of Malach and Tircha, and don't even chop it up if it broke on Yom Tov, it's going in the order of Zu, the Ein Sarich Lomar Zu. What does that mean? That's a different kind of an ordering of the Chidushim. This
and not that.
And it goes without saying this. So I'm not going more and more Chiddush, I'm going less Chiddush. This is true, and it goes without saying that this is true.
So it's like a reverse Kol.
Yeah, but it's like, so when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi set up different things in the Mishnah, usually went in the opposite order. This is true, and even this is true, right? It's like you're going for the bigger Chiddush each succeeding sentence or a list in the list. But there are some Mishnayos that we deem them to be going the other direction for whatever reason. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi liked to sometimes make the other kind of a Mishnah. There's this, and it goes without saying this. So in this case it would be what? Don't chop wood if it broke on Erev Yom Tov, which is a bigger Kiddush, because has nothing to do with Muksa. So what should be the problem? Only some kind of Malacha, or Tircha, Rashi says. And then it says, and not only that, but it goes without saying that you can't chop up wood if it broke on Yom Tov, because then it's even a problem of Muksa. Okay? V'hainu, and that is, according to Rashi, you want to go over that again? I'm sorry, you want to go over that again?
No, ולא מן הקוראים פתחו וזו ואין צריך לו מזו.
Katani. We learned a style of Mishnah. If this would be really the way to learn the Mishnah, that means we're learning a certain style of Mishnah called, quote unquote, Zu ve'in tzarich lomar zu. It's that, if Rashi's saying, if it's really true the way we're learning right now, that would require assuming that the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi decided to write a Mishnah in this style, called Zu ve'in tzarich lomar zu, where he's listing a Chiddush, and then he's saying, and it goes without saying the next Kiddush. 2 Kiddushim, but the second was less of a Kiddush. To Mutvinan, and Hainu means that is, right? Now I've explained, the way I'm explaining it, that is exactly why, in other words, to Musvinan, that we're asking a question in our Gemora, based on this assumption that we're making in the Mishnah of how to learn the Mishnah. Rashi says now that we're making that assumption, that's why the Gemora can then turn around and ask the following question, that what? Klal.
Not to chop at all.
We're not allowed to chop at all. So Rashi's saying, in the way that we're learning the Mishnah now, the first halacha is don't chop wood at all. Even if it has nothing to do with Muksa, it got broken on Erev Shem Tov.
Is that what Rashi's saying?
Is what Rashi's saying.
Don't chop wood at all, right?
Rashi's saying that the assumption, there's an assumption of the Gemora, that the right way to learn the Mishnah is, you start out by assuming the first halacha is talking about a board that broke Erev Yom Tov.
First assumption, the board.
He's telling you don't chop a board that broke what? Erev Yom Tov.
Yeah.
Now, Rashi pointed out that that can't have anything to do with Muksa then. Right? It's not because it's Muksa. It broke Erev Yom Tov. The only problem, Rashi said, is that, you know why the Mishnah would be telling you not to chop it? Because there's a problem of Malacha and Tircha, Rashi said. There's a chashash you might do tochein, there's a problem with too much work, whatever. And then the Mishnah turns around and tells you, and you know what? That's true, and it goes without saying that you can't chop up a board either that was broken on Yom Tov. So both cases are talking about a board that broke. The way we were learning before, it was when we originally learned the Mishnah, we talked about Muksa Machus and Saran Kis. Rashi's saying that's not the Havamin of the Gemora. That's not what we're thinking.
Was there Katani?
We learned.
Oh, right.
Let's say the Tana learned. The Tana learned a certain type of a Mishnah. Right? It's like you go to the store and you ask for alamod. Right? That's a certain kind of a pie where you get the ice cream on top. Right? And then, or you could go and you can ask for something a la carte. Right? When you ask for a la mode, you're asking for one thing. When you ask for a la carte, you're asking for something else. Right? Which is actually the opposite of a la mode. Right? A la carte means everything separate. Right? So that's the we have different names for different things. Right? We have a la mode for a certain type of thing, a la carte for something else. Right? So Rashi's saying we have different styles of Mishnah. Whoever reads enough Mishnayos and whoever learns enough Gemoras that talk about the Mishnayos will see there's different types of Mishnayos. Sometimes you say Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was creating one type of Mishnah, and sometimes he was creating a different type of Mishnah. So the Gemora starts by assuming it's one type of Mishnah. You know what type of Mishnah the Gemora assumes it is? A Zu ve'ein tzarich lomar zu katani. that he decided to learn, Katani means that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi decided to learn when he wrote this Mishnah, a special kind of a Mishnah called Zu Vein Tzarich Lomar Zu, where the two Chidushim that follow one after the other, it's not in ascending order, it's in descending order.
How do we know that?
Huh?
How do we know that?
How do we know what?
That one's descending, one's...
Well, think about the words. This, and it goes without saying this. If I'm presenting you two things, and I say there's this, and it goes without saying this, I'm presenting you two things, right?
Isn't it Kal V'chomer?
No, it's actually the opposite of Kal V'chomer.
Yeah. And I mean, what I'm asking is, why is the Zu...
Because it's describing the two things Rabbi Yehuda Nasi often likes to present two halachas. Okay?
Right.
So he either is presenting them in ascending order of Kiddush or descending order of Kiddush. This is a kind of less common Mishnah where it's being suggested at least that he wrote one called Zu Ve'ein Tzarich Lomar Zu, where it's going in descending order. He's presenting you with something, and then he's presenting you the second item, but really he's presenting it as, and it goes without saying. Right? Which if you take it literally, goes without saying means he didn't really need to say it. Right? Because you could have made a Kal V'chomer. You could have done that on your own. But he didn't let you do that. He held your hand and he said, these two are true. This one is a bigger Kiddush, and it goes without saying the second thing, which is a lesser Kiddush. But I'm going to tell you anyways. Even though it goes without saying, I'm going to tell you anyways. Okay?
So the Tzad V'Zul is another Kiddush.
You sorry?
Tzad V'Zul is another Zul.
There's two different... It's always assumed that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is trying to teach you two halachas. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, but often there's two halachas. So what we have here is one type of way of presenting those two halachas, where it's going in descending order of Chiddush. I'm presenting you a Chiddush, and then I'm presenting you a second thing, which is a lesser Chiddush. So really you could say, why tell me? Once I already know the bigger Chiddush, I don't need to hear it. But that's what this style is telling you. So this is true, and it goes without saying that this is true.
So what is the practicality of this in this Mishnah?
Rashi says at the beginning, when we're thinking to learn the Mishnah a certain way, this is how we would explain the Mishnah. First of all, Rashi said that the first halach has nothing to do with muksa, right? And it's telling you just don't chop that wood. Because it's tircha or malacha, whatever, don't chop wood on Yom Tov, even if it broke before Yom Tov. So it's not an issue of muksa at all. The only issue is malacha and tircha. So the first halacha Rabbi Yehuda Nasi chose to teach us was that halacha, where that even if it's not a question of muksa, he's still telling you it's usher for a bunch of other reasons. Okay, so that's a much bigger kiddush. Even when there's no question of muksa involved, you still can't chop wood on Yom Tov. Because you might get into trouble with doing a malacha or doing tircha. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said the Rabbanan asered it. Okay?
Not just because of muktzah, it's because of malacha, tircha.
So the first halacha has nothing to do with muksa whatsoever. Rashi said we assumed in the beginning that the first halacha of the Mishnah was telling you don't chop wood even if it broke erev Yom Tov. Right? Like we were saying, it's muksa, machim, chisar, and keys, but Rashi's saying, no, it broke. It broke already, but not like the second case where it broke on Yom Tov, the first case where it broke erev Yom Tov. So Rashi's saying, if we'll assume that that's what the Mishnah is teaching us, which Rashi says that is the assumption in the Gemora, first step in the Gemora is an assumption like that, then we'll have to also, together with that, assume that it's a kind of a Mishnah which is less of a common Mishnah, much more rare type of Mishnah called Zu Ve'ein Tzarich Lomar Zu, where the two halachas that are being presented are in descending order of Kiddush. But since they do happen from time to time, we're allowed to suggest it from time to time. Right? So Rashi, that's the initial suggestion, that this is the way to learn the Mishnah, that there are two halachas in the Mishnah, at the beginning of the Mishnah. What are the two halachas? Don't chop wood even if it broke erev Yom. Why? Because you might get involved into malacha or some kind of tircha problem, right? And the second halacha, and of course, don't chop wood if it broke on Yom Tov, where there's an even bigger problem, muksa.
So that's going up the ladder, that's not going down.
No. Which is a bigger chiddush? I can't chop wood that's not muksa, or I can't chop wood that is
It's
muksa.
a chiddush, but in severity it's the other way around.
Again, we're not working in terms of severity, we're talking in terms of chiddush. Okay? A Mishnah is supposed to teach you a chiddush. So, the normal Mishnah starts out the other way around. You know, I'm going to tell you a chiddush. Then I'm going to tell you, and not only that, but even this is true. Usually it goes uphill, right, in terms of chiddush. Here Rashi is saying the assumption of the Gemora was to learn that the two cases are going in descending order of chiddush. Zu, first halacha, good, interesting chiddush. Vein sorry klomer zu, and this goes without saying. That'll be the second chiddush, which is acceptable upon occasion. We do have mishnayos like that. So Rashi just wanted to tell you, don't think that I didn't think of that. I thought of that, and that's okay. It's acceptable, because there is a category like that, a less populated category, but it's a category. But Rashi says because of that particular way of learning the Mishnah, which the Gemora thought to do originally, therefore the Gemora came up with this question that, but you already told me it's usher. That's what Rashi's trying to explain now. The last part of the Rashi is saying Hainu, and that is, in other words, that is why the Musvinan, that the Gemora can ask the question V'ha Amras, but you already said in the Reisha that Ein Mavakim Klal. You told me I can't chop at all. And then V'hadar Tani de Bekofitz Shari. Then you went ahead and said, but with the Kofitz it's mutter. So Rashi's saying pretty much the way we understood the question. That you start out by telling me you can't chop, and then you turn around and say you can chop. Rashi's saying, when we originally heard in the Mishnah you can't chop koros, we thought it's talking about a case of koros that broke Erev Yom Tov. If so, it's basically saying you can't chop wood at all. You can't chop wood at all. Even if it broke Erev Yom Tov, you can't chop wood. Why? There's no problem with muksa. No, you might get into malacha, you might do tircha. Can't chop it all.
It's too much.
Too much, right? So Rashi says, once we were learning the Mishnah that way, then it makes sense that the Gemara should say, but you just told me I can't chop at all. No matter what, I can't chop. Because I might get involved in malacha, I might get involved in tircha. And then you turn around and tell me, but if you're going to use an implement, use the kofitz. That sounds like a contradiction. Okay? That's how Rashi explains this question. That's why, according to Rashi, the Gemara has a good question. Okay?
So, Tani,
Huh? Where are you?
the last line of Rashi.
Yeah.
So you came along and...
Hadar means you went back after you made statement number 1. Now, you should know, we were just talking about statement 1 and 2 in the Reisha, as a zu vein sorry klomar zu, right? But Rashi is saying now, just look at the Reisha as one halacha. You can't chop wood at all. I don't care if it broke Erev Yom Tov, broke on Yom Tov, you can't chop wood. End of story. So if the Reisha is saying that you can't chop wood at all, then how come the Hadar Tani, you came back again at the end of the Mishnah and told me you could chop with the kofitz? That's what's bothering the Gemora. How can you turn around and say you can't chop with the kofitz when you start out the Mishnah by telling you can't chop wood at all? Right? Which you and I would have said, well, I didn't see the Mishnah telling me that. Rashi says, because you didn't look at the Mishnah the way the Gemora looked at the Mishnah. The Gemora looked at the Mishnah as this all-out statement. You can't chop wood at all. Where did the Gemora say that? When it told you can't chop koros, and you can't chop koros that broke on Yom Tov, Rashi said, you know what it was? What we thought that was saying? You can't chop koros that broke Erev Yom Tov. And you can't chop them even if they broke on Yom Tov. Right?
They can't chop.
Can't chop at all. Can't chop at all. Okay? Then why did he turn around and say you can't chop with the kofitz? That's how Rashi's learning the Gemora's kasha. Okay? So now we are ready for an answer. More than ready. Good, good. I like that. Okay, Jack more than ready.
Okay, so
Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel.
Correct.
Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Chasura Mechsara. The text missing.
Where's the text
The
missing?
Mishnah.
Somewhere in the Mishnah, either the Reisha or the Sefer. We're not sure which yet. Hopefully we'll be informed about that. And once you fill in the words that are missing, it'll make sense. So what is the real way to learn the Mishnah?
Well, let me tell you, this is what the Mishnah means to say.
Right.
It says, Ein mevakin min ha-soise shakares,
No, so are.
ha-soa shakares. One cannot chop off wood being from a soar.
So are. No, so are. What's so are? What do you think so are is? It's a funny word, huh? Rashi. So are shall koros. And by the way, let's see the first Rashi. Hisuri Mexera. The Gemora is in the process of explaining that something's missing from the Gemora, from the Mishnah. Rashi says what? You see that, Shabbatai?
Yeah.
What is Rashi saying?
We're talking about the Resha Mishu Muktzah.
Once you put in what's missing, once we get into the new explanation, we're going to see that the Reisha is not telling you what we thought it was telling you. They just can't chop wood at all. No. It's only due to muksa. Right? Once you add in the words that are missing in this Mishnah, you'll see that the Reisha is only telling you, don't chop wood that's muksa. Which is the way we originally learned the Mishnah, right? Don't chop lumber because it's muksa, machmus, chisar, and kis. It's too expensive, it's worth too much. Okay? Rashi's saying once we add the words which we're about to add, then it'll make sense. Now, what's a soar shel eitzim? The next Rashi. Soar shel korosari.
Mushkar what?
Yes. What does that mean? Mushkavot. What's the root of that word? Shochev. You know what that word shochev means? Ubeshach becha ubekumecha. When are you supposed to say the Kriya Shema? Beshach becha.
When you're sitting and standing.
No, not sitting.
lying down.
Lying down. When you lie down and when you rise up. Lying down to go to sleep is mentioned first because that's when the Jewish day starts at night.
Shachav means to sleep, to lie down.
To lie down, which can include sleeping, which can include, by the way, the Gemora uses this word to include dying. Nice way to say a person dies to say he lay down forever. I mean, till Tchias HaMesim. Right? Okay, so that's the Gemora's like euphemism for dying. So here Rashi's saying these pieces of wood are what? Mushkavot. They are
Lying down.
lying down, as it were, laid down, really, some passive, really. They are been laid down where?
In a pile.
Al Haaretz. On the... Okay, first La'aretz. Let's just talk about that.
On the earth, on the ground.
Right? They've been laid down on the ground, right? They're laid down on the ground, and in English, you know what we call that? Piled up.
Mush.
You take boards, right? And you put the first one, then you put the second one, then you put the third one.
Yeah.
Right? What's it called in English? Stacking the boards, right? Stacking it up, piling it up into nice piles. Like I said, when you go into a lumber yard, it's all neatly piled into the stacks of boards, right? So they can sell it nicely. They don't want you messing around with it either. And Rashi says, because it is for what? Bin yan.
For building.
For building purposes, right? That's what the lumber yard is for. The builders come in. The guy who's building his house, he comes in, he orders 22 by 4s and I don't know, 100 5 by 4s or whatever. I don't know, whatever it is, right? That's Rashi's way of saying what we learned originally in the Mishnah. That koros is like a code word for what? Muksa, machmas, chisar, and kis, like we saw a few pages ago, right? The arze levanon or whatever they were, or rozim, something. What are they called there? Arze v'shucha, arze v'shucha, muksa, machmas, chisar, and kis. Okay. So big, nice pieces of lumber for building are called muksa, machmas, chisar, and kis. That's what Rashi's really saying. These have been laid down very nicely on the ground, and you know why they're laid down nicely on the ground? Because they're not just firewood. They're building. They're for building. They're timber for building, right? So therefore they're very expensive, and the guy's saving them for the process of building, not for firewood. Okay? So according to Rev Shmuel, whatever, Rev Yudam or Shmuel, that is how we learn the first part of the Mishnah. So therefore the original way of learning the Mishnah was what? Don't chop up these boards that have been what? Remember how Rashi explained it before?
Broken.
No, we thought it was talking about where they were already broken Erev Yom Tov. Now Rashi's saying that's the Gemora is saying that's not the pshat.
Line down.
These are proper pieces of lumber that have been laid out on the ground for purposes of building. So that's what Soar Shel Koros is, like a nice pile of boards. Not boards that were broken. Okay? So halacha number 1 in the Mishnah is what? Not what we thought. Not telling you not to chop up boards that got broken Erev Yom. It's telling you don't chop up boards that have been reserved for the building. For construction. That was halacha number 1, which we're revising basically through this new definition. Below, sorry, and also you're not allowed to what?
Gemora?
Yes, we're in the Gemora.
Lo min ha-kurish nishpor b'yontiv.
And the second halacha in the Mishnah is telling you don't even use a korah, even this expensive kind of wood that's already gotten what? Broken on Yom Tov. Right? So Rashi says, well, what did you think you gained? We thought before it broke, it was very expensive wood and it was reserved for construction, for building. But now that it broke, what would I think? See, here's Rashi saying the Kiddush. Afal Gav. You want to try it, Jack? Lo min hakor shenishbar b'yom tov. Rashi.
Afal Gav.
Yeah.
Lahashta. Lahasaka.
Kind. Let's just stop there. Remember I said in Rashi, the Kiddush is always the Afal Gav or the Afal Pi. So Rashi is saying the Kiddush is that even though, I'm telling you not to use it, even though what? Hashta. What's Hashta?
No.
Now that they broke, what are they good for? Lahasaka kaimi. They're standing to be used for burning, right? For fuel. So you're right. Beforehand, they were very expensive pieces of wood, but now that it broke on Yom Tov, that's the second halacha. Where it broke on Yom Tov, I would think that now maybe I can use it for firewood. I mean, what else are you going to use it for? Now it's broken. That's what it's standing to be used for. Now that's the normal usage of a piece of wood that broke. So Rashi said, I would have thought that since it's now standing to be used for firewood, I could use it for firewood. But no. Since Bein Hashmashos, Lav, that when Yom Tov came in, Bein Hashmashos, during the twilight moments of the beginning of Yom Tov, that's when the halachas always get fixed in, placed. And then what happened at that time? Lav lahaki kaima. They were not what? Kaimi. Rashi used the verb before. Kaima. Standing, right? Standing for a certain usage. So Rashi says right now they're standing for using for firewood. But were they standing for that when Yom Tov came in? No. It happened to break on Yom Tov. So now, there's only one thing that they're good for. But when Yom Tov came in, that wasn't true. So even though, let's say, according to Rabbi Shimon, remember we talked about Rabbi Shimon, he would say now that it's standing for firewood, you could use it. Because I don't care what happened at the beginning of Yom Tov. But this is obviously going like Rabbi Yehuda, who cares about what happened at the beginning of Yom Tov. If at the beginning of Yom Tov it was considered muksa because it had no other usage other than using it for building, then even later when it loses that job, because now it's broken, it's still usher. Still, that's how muksa works, right? So,
Once muksa, always muksa.
once muksa, always muksa, exactly. It's according to Rabbi Yehuda. So, this would seem to be going like that. The Gemora at the beginning of the Masechta said that also. Here's a halacha that's clearly like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so let's go on in the Gemora. You don't have to ask for permission. It's a true need. Okay, so let's go back over the Gemora again. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. What's the answer? Why is this Mishnah not contradicting itself? Why is it not seeming to say don't chop wood at all and then turning around and saying but use a kofitz? Because Kisura Mexera, because it's missing some words, and if you add those words, everything makes sense. Bahaki Katan. And this is what you should really be learning in the Mishnah, to supply those words that are missing. That what? Ein mevakim. We're not allowed to chop what? Right? Min hasoar shokoros. Only we're telling you don't use wood that's standing being used in construction purposes, because it's all stacked up nicely. That's the kind of wood that we're telling you not to use at the beginning of the Mishnah. We're not saying generally you're not allowed to chop wood. And by the way, if we now backed away from the original supposition, what happened to the problem of toching? Right? If the Havamina said, I was worried maybe you'll chop the wood so finely, does that mean now we're not worried about that? Or not enough to make a gezerah? Right? Maybe it's still a problem if you really do chop the wood finely. But if you are careful to chop larger pieces, like when you make a salad, you're supposed to leave larger pieces of the tomato and everything, not smaller. So therefore, maybe we give you the same leeway when you chop wood. Try to make sure when you chop the wood, you chop it in bigger pieces and not finely chopped wood. So that maybe explains why we thought originally maybe there was a gezerah that we wouldn't let you do it, but now we're saying the new pshat in the Mishnah, that's not a problem. Not a problem of tircha either, apparently. The other problem that we worried about tircha, we're saying also the Mishnah's not talking about that. That's not a problem necessarily. Okay, so then if that's true, then it's only talking about what? Don't use this wood that's designated for what? Building purposes. That's the first halach in the Mishnah. And why not? Because it's muksa machmas chisar and kiss, right? It's a problem of muksa, like we originally thought. And then also it goes on to say, halacha number 2 of the Mishnah, v'lo min hakoresh nishbar b'yom tov. You can't use a board that broke on Yom Tov, because even though now it's no longer standing for building, and now it really has only one usage to be used as firewood, but since it started Yom Tov, with the designation of being muksa, it remains as an item of muksa the whole shop, the whole Yom Tov. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda, and that's how our Mishnah is going. This Mishnah is going. But then it says that we should continue to read the Mishnah as saying, Mevakin, which means what?
No,
kishen.
bring.
That's right. And when people
do
do chop the wood, because we already said it is mutter to chop wood. Now our new way of reading the Mishnah is it is mutter to chop wood. We never said it's usher to chop wood. We always said it's usher to chop a certain type of wood. So we're saying, and when you do chop the right type of wood, then we're saying...
We don't chop with an axe.
With a professional axe.
Not with a sickle.
Right. Magera, we should switch the order, by the way, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, now with a saw.
And a kofitz, rather with a
butcher's chopper, right? Machete. What?
This last thing is called
Kofitz?
Yeah.
No. It's like cleaver, a meat cleaver. Leave it to cleaver.
There's a place called Kofitz in the old city.
The coffee store?
Yeah, it's called Kofitz.
Apparently it's called Kofix.
No, that's the one place, but the other one in opposition to is called kofitz.
Oh.
All sorts of funny things there. So
Well,
we're going to chop your business off.
Studying Gemora for
apparently, yeah.
Gemora.
They say that whole article about the fellow who started Coptics,
Yeah.
and they said he's like a frum guy who started out in B'nai B'rak, and he had a lot of different things, difficulties during his life. And they say it was a whole cover. He was on the cover of Mishpacha magazine. I think his name's Avi Katz or something. A whole article about how he endured a lot of struggles and he was tremendously toughened in Hashem. Very nice article.
Nice. So business is doing very well this year.
Apparently.
In Dafka they opened one just like that called Kofitz. Just around the corner.
It's possible.
The same thing.
If he was of that type, I'm sure he could take him to court and sue him for...
Copyright infringement.
Alright. So, the mission now makes sense, right? Basically, the Mishnah now, the way we're learning it now, is very much like you and I learned the Mishnah originally. Now, why can't you chop the lumber? Because it's muksa mas mukhisar and kis. Certain type of muksa. It's too expensive and worth too much to use as firewood, to just chop up. But then it's saying also, there's another halacha that even if it broke on Yom Tov, you still can't chop it up, because even though now it's no longer really expensive wood or anything, and it is only really fit for using in a fire anyways, but you still can't do it according to Rabbi Yehuda, because as the halachas of muksa are all lined up and fixed in cement, as it were, on the beginning of Yom Tov. So once it already had a din of muksa, you can't remove it later. Now, the Gemora says, Tanya nami hachi. We even learned in a Beitsa what? Hachi, such a thing.
Ein mevakin eitzim lo min asura.
So are.
So are not, we don't chop wood on a pile, on a pile of wood, shell korot, with a chopper, lo min korot from a beam, and not with a chopper. In a korot. Sorry, and not on a pile, and not on a pile that was broken.
Again, koros are special
beams
that have been properly manufactured for construction purposes.
And even one that's been broken on Yom Tov.
Lefi
she'einu min ha-muchim, because they're not being prepared.
So that's a nice way of saying they're muksa. Right? Both of these cases are muksa, and therefore you can't use them. So this proves that what? Who's right?
Rabbi Yehuda.
Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Right? Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. That's what Rashi says. Tanya nami hachi. We're proving from a Beitsa that what? Rashi says. Everyone have the Rashi?
Yeah. Shmuel.
Kid? Shmuel. We learned in a Beitsa also like Shmuel said, right? Just like Shmuel's interpretation of our Mishnah, we find it explicitly in a Beitsa. That what? The timer, the misnisin, that what? The reason for our Mishnah is
Shmuktzah.
Shumbooks. It's all because of books, right?
Why Shmuel?
Excuse me?
Why Shmuel?
He's the one, in Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, but we're now saying it's really Shmuel in the end. He's the one who said that the way to interpret our Mishnah is what's called the Chisurei Mechsera. There are words missing, and the words you have to insert are, when it tells you don't chop wood that's koros, it means ones that are set up in a nice pile in the lumberyard. So are shel koros. That was Shmuel's Kiddush. He added that to the Mishnah. Without Shmuel, we thought it was talking about koros that broke Erev Yom Tov. It was a whole different problem. Just chopping wood in general is a problem. Now with Shmuel, we say that wasn't the pshat in the Mishnah. What the pshat in the Mishnah is, don't chop wood that's koros, that's proper lumber, that's set up as proper it's set up in a lumberyard, all stacked up, all piled up, that's ready to go. So it's obviously something expensive that the guy has all set aside for the building purposes. So that's Shmuel's Kiddush. Shmuel told us to read the Mishnah that way. And now we see in a Beitsa exactly what he said. It says in the Beitsa. That's what the Beitsa says. The shot is, don't chop wood that's already been set up in this soar thing. Correct?
Special pile.
It's like a lumberyard. It's like a lumberyard, right? Or maybe each person has his own little lumberyard in the back, right? He might not be a professional lumber guy, but if someone wants to do a little bit of building, they set up a bunch of planks of lumber in their backyard or in their barn. It's all ready to go, all ready to be used for construction. So Soar Shel Koros is like telling you the kind of koros that they're still in perfect condition for construction, and they're all ready to go. They're all piled up, ready to go. But we didn't originally learn our Mishnah that way, right? We learned our Mishnah was talking about koros that had broken Erev Yom Tov. He's the one who told us, no, it's not talking about that. It's talking about koros that are still fit to go. But you, for some reason, would want to chop them up into firewood. I'm telling you, no, you're not allowed. Okay? Good. Okay. So we got to the end of that section. And then we have the next section that talks about the different implements. You want to try to start that? Or are people at their wits' end?
We can start it and push ourselves more.
It's very admirable of you.
Sorry, would you mind,
Uh-huh.
would you mind just summarising what you just learned?
Well, we had a problem, and then we answered the problem. Which one do you want summarized?
Yeah, I'm just not sure, and it's in my brain.
Which part? The problem?
The whole-
Do you understand the problem? Or the answer?
Well,
Or
we
both?
don't have to chop wood at all.
That's what we thought it was saying.
Right.
That's what we thought it was saying.
Why?
Because of the problem of Malacha, Rashi says, and Tircha.
Melach and tircha. Right. That's a chiddush.
Yes, that, as I said, there is at least a havamina that it would be tochim, right?
Right.
We talked about that. When you chop up something very finely, it is tochim. So that could have been what we're worried about. And Rashi adds also tircha. Another problem of chopping up wood in general is that you're working very hard on Yom Tov. Harder than we want you to be working on a Yom Tov.
And then comes along Yehuda Mashmol.
Yeah, but he's answering a question. So you can't just jump into him. You have to understand the Gemorah's question. Okay? Did you understand when the Gemorah had a question?
No.
Okay, so let's try to summarize the question then. The Gemorah said, if the pshat in the Mishnah is telling you can't chop wood at all because of that problem of...
Well, the kofetz.
That's right. Then why you turn around and tell me you could use a kofetz? Okay? So Shmuel now has to redefine the Mishnah and tell you no. The Mishnah was not telling me you could not chop wood at all. It never said that. What did the Mishnah say then, according to Shmuel? You can't chop wood that's standing to be used in a building. Because of the problem that we mentioned originally. Muksa, Makmus, Ksar, and Kis. Right?
Yep.
So if that's what the Mishnah is saying, so it never told you can't chop wood in general, it just told you can't chop a specific type of wood that's muksa. But most wood is not muksa. Right? Like we saw in the previous Mishnah. If you go to the karpef, right? You go out to the enclosure and you get a bunch of pieces of wood, you're allowed, according to the Mishnah. Not muksa. Regular wood is not muksa. So if you learn like Shmuel that the whole issue in the Mishnah was only a muksa issue, don't chop up koros because they're too expensive. They're muksa, maknis, ksar, and keys. But of course, now it doesn't conflict with the end of the Mishnah, which says you can use a kofetz for what? For all the other types of wood that you are allowed to cut. So that doesn't bother the Gemora anymore.
wood from a curry can't use, right?
According to this, that's right.
Is that
Too expensive.
Is that a compter?
Excuse me?
Is that
In a way, I mean, I'm still talking about koros. That never stopped. I would say, personally, the original supposition of the Gemora is a little bit of an akimta. Because it only talks about it breaking on Yom Tov. Rashi said the Gemora supposed that we're talking about ones that broke Erev Yom Tov as well. To me, that seems like adding something that wasn't in the Mishnah. Rashi said that's how we originally thought to learn the Mishnah, as if that's the most simple way to learn the Mishnah. To assume that both cases are broken wood. Maybe you could say the reason why we prefer that originally is because the chiddush that we're talking about, muksamach, kisar, and kis, is maybe not such a big chiddush. We already had it before. We've already talked about it earlier. That's not such a big chiddush. Even on Shabbos, there's such a halacha. Something that's too expensive, of course, you can't use. You can't just use a diamond ring to pick your teeth. I mean, the women don't want you touching your diamond rings, right? Because it's called. I would say that's muksamach, kisar, and kis. Who doesn't want you just using her diamond ring for?
actually teeth cost you more than rings these days?
Try to convince your wife of that. Dear, I need a toothpick. There's no toothpicks in the house. Can you lend me your diamond ring? And you know what's going to happen to you? She'll turn you into a toothpick.
Really,
And she'll pick her teeth with you, and then you won't even be able to walk at the end of Shabbos. Okay?
Pick on you. No
That's
way.
right. Women are always picking.
well, at least you're getting to the